is good made death unto me, God forbid. Now notice this. But sin, that it might appear sin, working death in me by that which is good, that sin by the commandment might become exceeding sinful. Lord will bless to us the reading of his precious word. What I would like to look at tonight in these different portions is to bring out the theme of sin being exceeding sinful. Sin being exceeding sinful. We're going to look in the Garden of Eden when Adam sinned. And there you're going to see the sin of Adam as an exceeding sinful thing in creation. What Adam did and the repercussions of what Adam committed in the Garden of Eden, and how great that sin must have felt upon him, upon his conscience, upon his being, the responsibility that what he had done had caused God's good and very good creation to be marred. So we're going to look at the sin in the garden and creation and the exceedingness of it. And we're going to look at the sin of the king. It was a light thing for Ahab to walk in the sins of Jeroboam. And then he goes on yet and he serves Baal and he worships idols. And it was just like sin was a light thing to him. But King David, it was different. He said, my sin is ever before me. Against thee only have I sinned. And can you imagine what went through David's conscience? When the prophet gave him the story of the man with a lot of sheep and the poor man with one sheep. And David said that the man who took the poor man's sheep should be destroyed. And Nathan says, thou art the man. How sinful did that appear to him? So we're going to look at the sinfulness, the exceeding sinfulness of a king. Then we're going to look at the cross. The exceeding sinfulness seen at the cross. Now, who's that going to be for? I want you to see your sinfulness as you look at what took place at the cross. Exceeding sinful. There are things in life that we've grown accustomed to that aren't good, that are sin. You and I have been desensitized by sin, by our society. We've been desensitized to the reality and the exceeding wickedness of sin, and just by the repetition that we're bombarded with sin every day. It is no big thing now to hear of a shooting where there be 4 or 6 or 8 people killed. It's just every day in the news. And it used to be such a horrific thing, didn't it? It used to be such a big thing when you heard that, and now it's just commonplace and it doesn't affect us like it used to. And that's a bad thing. Because that tells us that what people are committing that are horrendous crimes to society and toward God, for all sin is ultimately toward God. It's telling us this, that our conscience is being seared. It is being dulled. It is being corrupted by constant sin. And because iniquity abounds, even in the Christian, the love of many wax cold. That is the reality of what sin is doing. And so I think tonight, if God gives help, we're going to try to impress upon our own selves the exceeding sinfulness of sin. And you're going to have to enter into each one of these people if you're going to get anything out of them. Try to relate. Try to relate. So you come to the garden and Adam is there. I look around at creation and you look at creation. We were talking a little bit about creation tonight at supper and the beauty of it, really. It's tremendous. It's marvelous. Well, did you realize that what we see in creation is just a sliver of what God intended it to be? Can you imagine what this world would look like if we would see it how Adam saw it, where sin hadn't corrupted and caused creation to groan? And we think that these things are beautiful that we see, and they are. But if the earth would yield its bounty and its fullness, what a place it's going to be even in the future. But can you imagine Adam? I see him there in the garden. And he named the animals. And there was no lion chasing the gazelle, and there was no hawk going after the rabbit. There was harmony, and there was peace, and there was unity in the garden. And the ecosystem worked perfectly in harmony together. And then Adam sins. There wasn't a weed and a thorn, and there was no need for Roundup, and there was no need for all the herbicides that we have today sprayed upon the ground. There was no need for a cultivator because there wasn't even a weed. And Adam sins against God, and now he hides himself because he is guilty. And then God starts to tell him the things that are going to take place. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. Now that must have touched his heart. He had no clue what that meant. But it didn't take long, and he understood that which God had made and was very good, now is starting to decay. It is starting to go the wrong way. Death comes in. The weeds come in. The sweat comes in. The curse comes in. And he would have to think back, and he would have to take responsibility. My sin caused this. God's perfect creation to work toward chaos. Really, that's what we're living in tonight, isn't it? As far as nature, as far as humanity is concerned, it's chaos. God is still over all, but it's chaos. And then he would teach his boys how to bring sacrifice. And Cain would kill Abel. Not only did he have to watch now the animals go after one another, the lion chasing the gazelle and eating the gazelle, and the hawk going after the rabbit, and the fox after the mouse, and everything that was so beautiful. Now it's just chaos. And then his oldest boy, his firstborn, takes to life and murders Abel. How would you feel if you were Adam? How would you feel if you were Eve? I know Adam is responsible as the head, but I want us, male and female, tonight to enter into this. My sin caused that. Right? Would sin be exceeding sinful? Would you be able to lay your head on your pillow and sleep at night? Comfortably? Maybe not at the beginning. But you see, our sin has been dulled down to us. And there are people in this audience tonight, and can I put it this way? You can attack the character of God and still sleep at night. You say, how do I do that? Every time we come and hear the gospel and go out in unbelief, we attack the character of God, for we call him a liar. 1 John chapter 5. The exceeding sinfulness of sin in creation. And then we went to a king. A king. Two kings. Ahab, sin didn't bother him. It was a light thing. It was just a flippant thing. It wasn't bad enough that his predecessors would sin against God. And he takes it to the next level. To the next level. The sins that we've grown accustomed to, that maybe we've grown up with, and now you've got a young king taking over, and he's going to take it to the next level. And that's what sin does, right? It always keeps increasing. It keeps going to the next level. But yet it was a light thing for him to sin against his God. It didn't bother him at all. Oh, I can see in Adam a contrite and a broken spirit because God provided a covering for him. And Adam would have had to acknowledge his sin before God when God says, Adam, where art thou? And he was guilty. But Ahab had no interest in God. And what about you? Put yourself in this king's shoes. Are you just looking for the next step to go into seeking sin and seeking pleasure? Is your sin just a light thing? It's no big deal to lie. It's no big deal to steal. It is no big deal. Everybody does it. The sin in this king wasn't exceeding sinful. He had chosen a path of sin, and sin took him further maybe than he thought he could go. Sin will do that to you, my friend. Sin will take you away from God faster than you could ever thought you could go. You know, it's the devil's lie to tell people that the farther they get from God, the happier they'll be. That's what he tells you. That's why we have to keep going for harder sins, bigger sins. Does that make us happy? No. You see it as a lie of the devil that the farther you get from God, the happier you'll be. And sinners are running from God, and they're hiding from God, and their sin is just a light thing to them. God forbid that's the case here tonight. And that we can reject Christ, that we can go about our sin as though it's no big deal. What about David, the other king? David was a man after God's own heart. And David was confronted with his sin. David's sin was premeditated sin. He planned it out. The worst kind of sin. The one that you think about. The one that you devise a plan about. The one that you carry it through to the end. What does he say about his sin? My sin is ever before me. Against thee only have I sinned. And there's this man who took another man's wife. And then he has this good, faithful soldier of his. He sends him to the front lines to be murdered, to cover up his sin. But it bothered him. It bothered him. And his sin was exceeding sinful, and he just wanted to be cleansed of his sin. Wash me thoroughly. Cleanse me from my sin. My iniquity is ever before me. What's that mean? It means he thought about it all the time. He couldn't get away from it. He couldn't escape it. It haunted him. And it hunted him. And it just bothered him. His conscience. It stirred and it stirred and it stirred. And his sin was ever before him. You remember when he numbered the people. And God gave him 3 choices. And he cast himself upon the mercy of God. And the 70,000 people died. And David took responsibility for his sin. And he pleads with God. He said, God, it's my fault. Why do you punish these when I am the one that sinned? You see, he took responsibility for his sin. Adam took responsibility for his sin. King David took responsibility for his sin. And it was exceeding sinful. Sin is a terrible thing. But have you forgotten about your sin? I remember something I did when I was a little boy. And from time to time I think about that. It was the dumbest thing. It wasn't a big thing, but it was sure dumb. What about you? Have you ever felt sorry for your sin? I don't mean sorry for the punishment that you got. Everybody's sorry once they get busted. But what if you never got busted? And no one ever knew the things you did, sneaking around here and there and this and that. Did it bother you?